Hey there, career seekers. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career. I'm here to help you find a career you like, and dare I say, possibly even love. I'm your host, Amanda Nachman. I'm the founder and CEO of College Magazine. After working with thousands of college students, I've noticed that when it comes to career, there's a lot to demystify. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Today I have with me Lindsey Pollak. She's a New York Times bestselling author and one of the world's leading career and workplace experts. She was named to the 2020 Thinkers 50 Radar list, which honors the top global management thinkers whose work is shaping the future of how organizations are managed and led. Lindsey's book is a response to the COVID crisis. I have it right here with me. It's called Recalculating, Navigating Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. And her other books include The Remix, How to Lead and Succeed in a Multi-Generational Workplace, Becoming the Boss. Who needs that one, right? We all want to become the boss. New Rules for the Next Generation of Leaders, and Getting from College to Career, Your Essential Guide to Succeeding in the Real World. Lindsey's speaking audiences and consulting clients have included more than 250 corporations, law firms, conferences, and universities. Her advice and opinions have appeared in such media outlets as The Today Show, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, and NPR. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, so what inspired your message in Recalculating? I am absolutely loving your book, by the way.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. So I didn't mean to write this book. And I want to start by saying that because I know your show is about nonlinear paths and sometimes making choices you didn't expect. My previous book, The Remix, had come out in 2019, and I was still promoting it and delivering speeches on it and really excited about it. And in March of 2020, you know where this story is going, I had a completely full speaking calendar of events around the Remix and other topics. And in about a 2-week period, I went from completely booked to a completely empty calendar. And it was shocking and devastating and scary and awful. It's fun to talk about it now that I'm on the other side of it, but it was really, really tough. And my agent, I will give her all the credit in the world, my literary agent said, "Do you think you want to write a book about this?" And my mission, very similar to yours, has always been to write the book I wish I had. And there were certainly no books on how to navigate your career and business through a global pandemic. And as I started to think about the topic, I'd love to hear your story of naming your book. I find it really hard to name books. And usually it happens at the very, very, very last minute that I finally come up with the title.
Yes.
This book, the title came first. Because I was looking out my window. I was in New York City at the time where I lived, and I saw these cars on the street, and I just had this like sudden flash of an image in my mind. It's never happened before. It might never happen since, of the point when you're driving your car, you know where the story is going, and you take a wrong turn or you hit traffic and your GPS says recalculating. And I just thought this pandemic is like catching all of us minding our own business, driving our cars, doing our thing, going where we wanted to go. And through no fault of our own, every GPS kind of, misfired and said, recalculating, sorry, you can't go the way you want to go. And that was really the image and the concept that I had. And just to preview what I'm sure we'll talk about, I sort of ultimately felt like it was optimistic because I know I feel sort of comforted when my GPS says recalculating, because it means there's another way to get where I want to go. There is a solution. There is another way. And that's sort of how I got out of the hole I was in when COVID started and how I advised other people to do it.
Yeah, we've been here before, we've figured it out, and we can do it again. All at the same time, we all had this wake-up call, whether we intended to have a wake-up call or not, but we all got it.
And so many people I spoke to said either COVID accelerated a path they had already started, or sort of validated that they didn't like the path that they were on, or that they had to, for me, it was, I had all my eggs in the speaking basket. That was 90% of my income. And it was like, oh, how for years, Lindsey, you've been talking about, diversifying your revenue streams and having other options. Guess what? Like, now's the time to figure out how to do that. You have no choice anymore. So I think it didn't, sometimes it completely altered people's paths, but other times it was just this huge catalyst for making a change that you kind of knew you had to make already.
Mm-hmm. And it's great to see that silver lining now, like to have those moments and reflect and say, I can see it. How do you encourage your readers, your audiences to adopt a recalculating mindset? Because, the message that I got as I was reading your book is we're not just starting over, right? We're not this like blank slate starting from scratch, but how do we adopt this message?
That's exactly right. And I love that you use the word mindset. I'm kind of embarrassed that this is my fourth book, and it's honestly the first time I've written extensively about mindset. I think I would often dive into, okay, roll up your sleeves, here are the tips, here's what we need to do, write your resume, get your LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah.
I'm
And I
the
realized
same
like that,
way. I love it. I
right?
love like take
I
action.
can
That's such
tell.
an entrepreneurial thing. You're like, don't show, don't talk about it. Like, show me what you can do. Let's make it happen.
Feelings, like, let's just go for it. I'm a Virgo, I'm a control freak, I'm type A, like, let's just do it. And that was like not going to cut it with COVID. And so mindset was really critical. And I went pretty far with the recalculating driving metaphor. And the other thing I thought about when your GPS is recalculating is it never says, sorry, Amanda, you have to go back to your driveway and start your entire journey over from the very beginning, erase how far you've come. No, your GPS says, all right,
that was MapQuest. That was the original. Right? That was MapQuest, because I do remember that.
You've made so many wrong turns, you could never, but that's not where we are. You never have to completely start over. There are always transferable skills. There are always connections you've made. No job or opportunity necessarily has to be wasted because it all adds up. And when I started to look at, the data and the research, there were a lot of economists who had done studies that, people in retail jobs or customer service jobs or really any job, when you really crunch the numbers and study the skill sets, were a lot closer to jobs in HR or sales or another field than you might think. They called it changing lanes, which very appropriately kind of kept with my driving metaphor. But when you actually look at what people do, it's very rare that you would ever have to completely start from scratch. And I thought that was very empowering.
Yeah. I feel like there are so many people that feel that they are starting from scratch, that they would have to if they were to leave what they were currently doing because it doesn't align with their passion. They're feeling stuck in their work. And they're like, that's the greatest fear that keeps them in that lane versus heading over to a new lane.
It was really interesting how many people told stories to me, which I had never thought of, where they said, yeah, I was a stay-at-home mom for 6 years and wanted to get back in the workforce. So I just walked in there and told them that I was a better candidate because I had stayed home. And I was like, you can do that? And I realized you're telling yourself stories all the time about what's possible or not possible. And the reality is I interviewed so many people who made transitions that like wouldn't have occurred to me were actually possible. But if you make the right connections with people and you're able to present your skills and tell your story in a certain way, not anything, but a lot of things are more possible than we think. But we get a story in our own mind that, oh, I'm too old, or, oh, they don't want women, or I've been out of the workforce too long. And that's often not true. So you really have to sort of leave those assumptions aside, decide what you want, which I think is really important, and start to see how it's possible. But some people just come by that naturally, which I really appreciate. I was never one of those people, but you can tell a story in a way that makes whatever your unique combination of skills really apply to a lot of different opportunities and probably more than you think.
I think it ebbs and flows. Well, at least for me, it's like there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm qualified to go after this next project. And other times where I'm like, am I really qualified? I feel like there's so much uncertainty. I don't know. You talk about how people, take themselves out of the game before it's even started. And can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were saying that, it reminded me there's a gender component to some of this, where the statistics showed that if you have a job listing and it has, let's say, 10 qualifications, a woman will not apply unless she meets all 10 qualifications, and most men will apply if they meet 4 of those 10 qualifications.
That's my favorite stat for like, remember that anytime you feel unqualified. I love that one because I think it's just so clear that we interpret qualified differently.
Absolutely. And even, the classic, I think, for college students is that required experience. And they see 1 to 2 years experience required. And what I always encourage people to think about is experience doesn't mean paid full-time work. Experience could be extracurriculars. Experience could be babysitting. Experience could be self-paced study through LinkedIn Learning or a free MOOC. It could be absolutely anything.
Your class
So you have
work.
to kind of, Your classwork of absolutely, absolutely. And so if you start to broaden your definition of these terms like experience or qualifications, you start to have a much broader opportunity field. But I will tell you, 100% more people are damaged by taking themselves out of the competition and not applying than people who apply too much. I don't think you can apply too much. I don't think you can overreach. I'm much more worried about people not applying and taking themselves out of the game before they've even been considered.
I couldn't agree more. And not just not applying, not connecting with someone because you don't think that person is worthy of your time. You don't think that person's going to get back to you. And you talk a lot about making connections in this book, which I absolutely love because I mean, obviously, I agree that it's such a big part of this journey, of the career journey. I want to talk to you a little bit about a time maybe where you felt unqualified or faced career rejection and what that was like.
There's so many.
That's hard to believe when you hear your bio, right? It's so hard to believe, but we all go through it.
I want to address that because you are not the first person who had said, what? Like I admit it. I have a lot of successes under my belt. I will tell you, I have played the long game. I have been doing this for 20 years. It took a really long time. Yes, I've spoken for 250 clients over 20 years, right? It takes time. So I love that concept of the long game, which is the title of a new book by my friend Dory Clark, so that I'm sort of stealing her thunder with that title. But when I think about the mistakes I've made, have I made a ton of like hugely public glaring errors? No. And thankfully I have not. But to this day, I regret the opportunities I didn't try for, right? The books I didn't write, the ideas I had that I didn't bring up, right? The speaking gigs that I didn't apply for because I didn't think I would get them. And I think that's really important. There was a CEO that I heard speak on a panel who said, I don't regret my failures. I regret the times I didn't try, because that's when you take yourself out of the game. So I want to give you a really small example. During COVID, as I was thinking about all the different ways I could maybe build my business or use my skills, one was to maybe teach a class at a college as an adjunct professor.
Cool.
And I started thinking about it, and I was speaking to my business coach about it. And she is an adjunct at two very prestigious schools. And of course, my little crazy brain was like, well, she must be special and she must be magic and everybody loves her and she's so much better than I am. I, of course, asked her, how did you get those gigs? Now, by the way, how many adjunct jobs had I applied for? Let's call it 0. And I asked her, how did you get those 2 incredibly prestigious adjunct roles? And she said, I applied to 200 schools.
Wow.
She did the work. It's not magic. She did the work and she got what she wanted. And when I do the work, things work out. And I always have to remember that. I have to remind myself of this every day. If you do the work, the magic happens. And I think the trick, because I also understand that this is a really, really crummy time. It's difficult out there. A lot of people are really frustrated and disappointed. And I didn't want my business to go away last year. I absolutely didn't want that to happen. I had to get over the sadness and the frustration of that. And I think the only way to do that, if you're in a funk, which a lot of people have asked me, like, I like everything you're saying, but I'm bummed out right now. This is really tough. And the answer is baby steps. Baby steps. Apply for 1 job a day, right? Don't reach out to 20 people on LinkedIn. Connect with your mom, right? And then the next day, connect with somebody a little bit more intimidating. It doesn't have to be huge leaps. I think the magic comes in the small steps over time. And I think that's the only way to really start and to really have momentum over time. You can take some big risks and that's great, but I found it's the consistent habits over time that really make you more successful.
Yeah, I like that. If you do the work, the magic happens. I even wrote that down. That's beautiful. And you kind of have a smiling with, or me at least, with, talk to your mom, but it's not a bad idea. Maybe just say, hey, mom, I need a confidence boost. Can we talk about my strengths? Can we talk about something that made you proud that I've worked on in the last couple of years, right? It doesn't have to be, I think we try to pull from our very most recent things that have been going on. And if you look around the world, the most recent things are kind of gloomy. So go further back.
I think a lot of people also get intimidated or overwhelmed by the word networking. And I don't care if you don't use it. It's just about making friends and building relationships. So when you talk about LinkedIn or, you said it's so important to reach out to people, that doesn't mean you have to reach out to quote important people, It's the people you know. And then they introduce
Mm.
you to the people they know. So just as if I said, hey, Amanda, I love the earrings you're wearing. Where'd you get them? And you would say, oh, there's this great jewelry shop. And I would look at that jewelry shop. It's the same as saying, hey, Amanda, I'm looking for a job in PR. Do you know anybody who works in that field? And you say, let me introduce you to my friend Sam, right? It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be this super formal, official, complicated thing. It's about talking to the people you know and having them introduce you and so on. So if you think about the people you went to high school or college with, your family, your friends, your neighbors, any sort of affiliations you have, that's where it starts and it builds from there. But there's this idea that networking has to be some big formal, important opportunity. It's not. It's the same way that you would network for anything that you're interested in. I think we have to take that whole drama and stigma away.
Yeah, it's so daunting, that word alone. I love how you break it down. I can tell by just hearing you answer these questions how fired up you are about helping people with their careers and what you do. How would you say, your work aligns with your passions?
Oh, I love that. So I always trace my origin story to being an RA in college. I really struggled in college. I did okay academically, but I didn't really find any extracurriculars that I loved. I had been, in chorus and stuff in high school, but I wasn't good enough in college to make it. Like I just was sort of like middle of the road. And when I became an RA my senior year, it was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This feels like a fit. And it wasn't academic and it wasn't extracurricular. It was sort of different. And I loved mentoring I actually, the way at my school was seniors were RAs for first years. And I loved mentoring them and telling them my mistakes and helping them and supporting them, but also kind of being the conduit to the administration and, having that role as well. And it just fit. And I realized I liked that role of sort of going through things and having them be meaningful because I could help somebody else along the way. So if I can say something that will make your path a little bit easier, that
Mm.
gets me so happy and excited. And it helps me, in return because I get to enjoy that. But to me, it's really all about I've learned these things and some of them are really painful and it makes me feel better when I know that that can help somebody else. I also think just frankly, I really love college campuses and I really like people are beginning their careers. My dad was a high school teacher and I think he just liked being a teenager and hanging out with teenagers. And I kind of feel the same way. I just really feel an affinity for that time of life of kind of figuring out who you are and finding your path and learning lots of stuff. And I don't think I did it that well. So maybe it's all just kind of a desire to correct it and do it a little bit better myself.
Well, I think there's this optimism that you get when you're
Yeah.
connecting with students. And yeah, just that moment where I can see like if you can make that difference. And I think you're doing that with your books, you're doing that with your talking. So, and it all started that moment when you were an RA. Do you hear back from students ever letting you know how, and thanking you? Do you hear back? And I bring this up not to say, how much have you helped, but I want to encourage anyone who's ever been helped, who's listening to this podcast, to thank people like Lindsey when they do make those impacts. And I just wanted to hear from you, like, what's it like when you do get to hear from them?
I can tell you do this work because I don't think anyone has ever asked me that question, and I love it. I give the same advice, which is it's one thing to give advice, but for that person to come back and say the advice helped, that's like the biggest win ever. It feels so good. So, yes, I have, and it feels amazing. Somebody just sent me an email on LinkedIn that I had inspired them with this book, and I just screenshotted it and saved it and printed it out because it makes me feel so good. So, yes, absolutely. Even a tweet or I love when people send me pictures of my book with post-it notes and dog-eared pages and that kind of thing. It's the right thing to do if someone has officially mentored you or helped you, which is that gratitude is A, what makes them want to help you again, but B, kind of the reason they're doing it. It makes people feel good. And one of the facts that I found when I was researching Recalculating is in March and April of 2020, searches on Google spiked for the sentence, how can I help? People
Mm.
want to help other people. And it's not just because it feels good, but to know that you've made a difference in someone's life is the ultimate reward. So, yeah, people do it and it feels great every time. I enjoy it and I'm grateful for it whenever people do it. And I try to do it for other people. I think it's really important to try to practice what I preach.
Yeah, I think so many of us have that fear, especially when we're younger, we're just starting out, that why would someone want to help me? Why would someone get back to me, give me their time, advise me, or tell me how they got to where they are in their career? And it's just listening to you just reconfirms just how much people do want to help. And that's why you should reach out. And of course, show that gratitude.
One other thing I wanted to mention is a guy named Steve Dalton, who I interviewed for the book, who is part of the career services team at the Duke Fuqua School of Business. He said, some people don't want to help. Some people will say no. Maybe reach out on LinkedIn and they're too busy or they're not interested. He said, and that's okay, because the people who do help and do say yes will be inordinately helpful. They'll be worth all the other people combined. So it's okay that some people are going to say no, because the ones who say yes will be extraordinary. And I thought that was really good. Don't get down on the ones who say no, because the ones who say yes will make up for all of that. And I've really found that to be true.
That's a good way of putting it. Can you tell me about the object you brought and how it reflects your passion?
Oh my gosh, so much pressure. Okay. So it's a very COVID specific object.
Tennis ball. Okay.
Tennis ball.
Let's hear it.
Because I have a list of 100 things I want to do in my life. And one is, when I was a kid, I used to like to play tennis. And because I lived in New York City for so long, it's just kind of hard. And I just never played tennis. And I always admired people and was jealous of people on Instagram who were playing tennis. And I always said, I'm going to play tennis again. I'm going to play tennis again. I'm going to play tennis again. And during COVID, we moved out to rural Connecticut. And I thought, I'm going to play tennis again. And I found a great tennis teacher. And there are two things about this. One is, I sort of didn't want there to be a global pandemic to get me back on the tennis court, but that kind of is how it happens. So there can sometimes be silver linings to really tough situations, ending up playing tennis. And number two is, I'm terrible. I'm legitimately terrible. And I've lost all of my skills and I can't get a serve in. And it's really fun and different to focus on getting better at something that I'm really bad at, because I don't do stuff I'm bad at.
So
all
the
time.
skills,
I'm 46 years old.
The tennis skills were not transferable from childhood, because I played tennis as a kid too. And I'm like, okay, so you're telling me if I get back on the court, it's not like riding a bike.
You'll hit the ball, but you're not going to hit it the way you want to. And serving has been a nightmare. So it's like that reminder of growth mindset and beginner's mind that it's good. Also, when I'm playing, I'm so focused on hitting the little ball that I can't really think about anything else. So it's actually been a stress reliever. So I think it's really good throughout your life to try new things and do things you're not good at, and kind of put yourself in that discomfort, because I think it kind of translates to other areas of life. So I am currently very passionate about tennis and not being quite as bad as I think I am. So that's my object is my tennis.
I love that. I think the sport that, and I hadn't played it or done this as a kid, but with surfing for me, definitely put me in my place. Those waves will, you can't think about anything else, but, just coming up for air once you're toppled. On the path to achieving early career success, do you feel that young professionals have trouble being taken seriously in the workplace? And if so, how do you overcome this?
Yes and no. I think there are huge disadvantages to coming of age right now and huge advantages. When I graduated from college in 1996, I don't think I had a single skill that my bosses didn't have, because they knew how to do everything and I didn't have any kind of new skill. Now, young people coming out of school have a technological sort of nature or ability that is so valuable that I think that there's a huge advantage to coming out and actually knowing what you're talking about when it comes to social media or technology, or simply just learning how to use technology faster. So I think that's a real advantage. What I will say is, I think is a disadvantage is, I think that a lot of younger people today don't have the comfort with face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball, talk on the phone communication that was sort of drilled into us at a younger age. The world was just more formal when I came up. I knew how to write a formal business letter. That was taught in school. And I think by everything becoming a little bit more casual, I think a lot of young people expect that the workplace will be like that and are kind of surprised when it isn't. So I think in some ways there's a disconnect. One of the things I say in my talks is a quote from Voltaire: common sense is not common, right? What people expect younger people to know is not necessarily fair. And you kind of have to learn that the hard way. So one of the things I say to companies is, you've got to write down your unwritten rules to make it fair to people entering. what they need to see. And I think it's harder in this remote environment since COVID to learn those nuances when you're not physically in the same space as people. So I
What a
think there are
great
advantages and
question.
disadvantages.
What a
Yeah.
great question someone interviewing could ask an employer is, what are the unwritten rules of your
Just
company?
things that you expect, or what time to show up, or what to wear, or what's appropriate. So I do think that employers want to take young people seriously. But I also think that for those of us who came up in a different era, we expect that you'll act exactly as we did. And it's a different world. So I think sometimes there's a disconnect there. That doesn't mean anybody has bad intentions. I think nobody hires someone and says, I hope that they're terrible. I think we want people to succeed. But I think sometimes employers are confused or surprised by some of the skills that we had when we graduated college that are not the same for today's young people.
How do we bridge that gap with this disconnect?
You bring me in as a speaker to talk about it.
Boom, mic drop. Love it.
No, I think it's about communication, right? And I think, frankly, it's about good training and good onboarding programs. So, I think colleges do their best to prepare young people for the workforce, but there are a lot of colleges, and I think in some ways, community colleges have taken a good lead on this. They bring in people from industry to do programming on the college level to say, this is what we expect. This is how to brand yourself. This is how to communicate. This is how to negotiate. I worked with one consulting firm that actually taught soft skills training to college students, and that included how to turn down an offer because they were surprised people were ghosting, right, and not handling job offers well. And they said, you probably have never done that before. We're going to teach you how to do that. If we expect you to graciously decline an offer, you need to learn how to do that. And I think the companies I most admire have really strong onboarding programs that teach you, this is how this is the tone we use in email. This is what professional dress looks like in our environment. This is how to address your colleagues. This is, the standard for annual reviews. So I think it's really about communicating expectations at all levels and not making assumptions about what people know and don't know. And I think the message to college students is ask questions, right? Don't assume that you know how to do something. It's always appropriate. Now, the problem is there are things you don't know. And my example, my first job at workingwoman.com, it was the website of Working Woman magazine in 1999 or 2000. I was helping with a contract. And I didn't know that when you make changes to a contract document, you use track changes. I just made the changes. And nobody knew what changes I had made. And that is really wrong. And I got in big trouble, but I didn't know I had never used track changes before. So sometimes you have to learn the hard way. But I think the other thing I would say is I'm really a big fan of kind of like buddy mentoring programs where someone who's only a year ahead of you gives you advice, because that would be the first thing that I would teach someone coming up behind me was like, okay, here's the thing on contracts. You may have never heard of track changes. I hadn't. Here's what I knew. And so it's about that communication, training, and transparency. But again, sometimes you have to learn the hard way. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, no, and it makes me think of a friend who told me when she first started out, she didn't realize that you could see other people's calendars on Outlook, and she was going around with like a Post-it note trying to find everyone's availability until somebody finally was like, did you know about this feature? And it's like, they don't teach Outlook features in, I've never taken a class that's taught that. And there's going to be things on the job that you have to navigate. And you're right. The best way to do it is to show up curious with questions. So any parting advice for young professionals today on starting out their career journey? Just getting started.
I always used to get annoyed when I was starting out and people would give advice like, it's going to be okay. Just keep your chin up. Like that is so not helpful. So I don't want to say something that's a platitude. So what I'm going to say is take one action a day toward your career success. Whatever it is, make one connection, read one tweet that's inspirational, listen to this podcast, update one line on your LinkedIn profile. I think that momentum, yep, it's right there in the book. Thank you. That momentum.
She's got checklists in here.
Important.
This is awesome.
I have checklists galore. But I know when I'm struggling or frustrated, I think, what is the smallest baby step I can take today? And what can I take tomorrow and the next day? So don't wait and think you're going to have a huge epiphany one day. Take those little steps over time. And I think that's the smartest thing you can do early in your career.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I want to leave everyone with something that Lindsey said earlier, which is that if you do the work, the magic the magic happens. So take actions, as Lindsey was saying, those little actions every day. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Lindsey. It was wonderful to have you. Thank you all for tuning in. And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to our show. Be sure to check out the show notes and email any questions to yourpassioncareer@gmail.com. Bye.